Danielle Cook is a professional nutritionist and cooking instructor, and her sister Adrienne Cook is a gardening and cooking writer. We're excited to have them with us for today's Cooking with Lemon and Tamarind live online cooking demonstration.
Hi, everybody. Happy Arbor Day. We're going to be talking about two relatively small trees today, the lemon tree and the tamarind tree. This is a tamarind pod. For those of you who have not seen one before, we're going to talk for a minute about that, But first of all, just so that you know, they are great to grow indoors, both these trees. They're tropical plants, so you can grow them in pots and keep them inside all year round, or you could put them out on your porch during the summer. But basically, they'll grow in the house all year round, and they don't mind. They like to be near a window, but they don't mind the low light that's typical of the house as opposed to outside. So you can grow both of them from seed, but they're easier to grow they'll actually produce faster if you grow them from a plant that's already been started from a grafting or a cutting. And you can buy those in the store, relatively inexpensive, somewhere south of $50. But anyway, give it a try if you're inclined to, and maybe in a couple of years, 3 or 4 or 5 years, you may get yourself some fruit. One caution, though, is that tamarind is considered unlucky to grow indoors by certain cultures. It originated in Nigeria, in Africa, Nigeria being one of the countries that it's native to. But now it's used all over in Indian cooking and lots of North African cooking, and basically really around the world is really coming into its own because it has a wonderful sour flavor. So let's talk for a minute about the different forms that tamarinds come in, because that's what I'm going to be dealing with today. Well, obviously you've seen this one already. The other way is you can get the pulp from the tamarind seed. You can get it seedless. This one is seedless, and it comes in a block like this. And you undo the block, and you just take a piece off of it, just like you would a piece of chocolate, and you drop it in some warm water for about 20 to 30 minutes, and it softens up, and then you just use it as a concentrate. What I'm using today is the actual concentrate that's been jarred, so you can also buy this in the store. It has a little bit of a flavor that almost tastes like it's been on the shelf for a while, which of course this does keep for a long time, so it has been on the shelf for a while, but it doesn't translate into what you're using it for. You'll just get that wonderful sour, mouth-puckering umami thing going on, and you mix it with different things like what we're going to do today with honey and vinegar and things like that, and it produces a great salad dressing. So if you're inclined to use the what we call fresh tamarind, which is actually the dried tamarind pod, but that's the way it comes. You can also find it green in some stores, but the basic inside is pretty much the same. You just take these off, the shell off, and inside you have something that looks like this. And here we've got some fibers that are attached to the pod itself. To the flesh. You want to get rid of as much of that before you start using it, before you start processing it, which is going to be the next step. So we're going to just peel all that off. It comes off quite easily, as you can see. And there's little bits that still cling on, and some of those may have to be soaked off a little bit, but most of them come right off, and you want to get rid of all the shell pieces like that, and drop it in a bath of warm water, hot water, really. I usually just boil some water and turn it off, and then put it on the tamarind, and then you have them going like this. And just this one's been sitting for about 15 minutes or so, and here it's gotten very soft. And you'll see as I pull the flesh off, you'll see the seeds exposed. And
Adrienne, can you hold one of those seeds up to camera so I can see it?
The seed, it's hard to see the seed. Let me see if I can get a better one. Here it is. There's a white seed under here. And they really grow prolifically in the tropics because they'll drop these seeds and they'll sprout all over the place. Each one of these pots probably has 10 to 20 seeds in it. Can you see that?
Not quite. Are you able to remove it at all so we can see it, or no? It's okay if you can't.
It's still got some pulp on it.
Maybe just describe
sometimes they're black, sometimes they're white.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sometimes they're black, sometimes they're white. It just depends on how ripe they are, and some sides. This one's have got a little bit more white on this side, and some black too. If you can see that, I don't know if you can see that. Anyway, so what the point is here to get rid of the seed, put that in one place, like a bowl, and then put the paste itself in a separate bowl. So if you're doing this at home, you're going to want to do all of them at one time, not do what I just did, which is to break it apart like this. I mean, to have two different ones at different stages. But you're going to do this actually in the bowl itself. So you're just washing the seeds in the bowl like this and putting all your tamarind pulp in the hot water. And that's going to become your concentrate. You need about 4 ounces of pods, which is about it would be probably about 6 or 7 of these. About this would be about 4 ounces. You need a half a cup of hot water. So put them all in, let them sit for 20 minutes, and then start pulling these seeds apart in the water itself. And that gets you the right concentration of tamarind to water, so that it's essentially very similar to the concentrated tamarind that I'm using now. I may be able to get you a better seed picture here. How's that? Got it? Okay. So we're going to set that aside, and we're going to start working on our actual recipe now. It's a messy job, but it's really rewarding in its own way. And if you're a purist, which some of us are, you really going with the actual fresh tamarind is a pretty great way to go. It'll bring on that kind of quality of freshness that you don't get with some of the others. But the other option is to go with one of this and then just do the same thing. Put that in hot water, and you won't have to deal with getting rid of the seeds with this one. Okay. So I'm mixing today. This is a slaw. You can use any kind of cabbage. You can make your own slaw. You can also buy the slaw already made. As you probably know, lots of stores have different types of slaw that's already pre-cut. The regular coleslaw type that we see everywhere with the carrots and other things like that, and it's fine. Or red cabbage, or even Asian slaw, which is usually made with a mixture of different things, like what I'm going to be doing today, which is the Napa cabbage, which I've already cut up, and broccoli slaw is another one. So any of those, just go ahead and use that. And we're just going to go ahead and add this, get a nice mix. Like so. And I'm going to make the vinaigrette in this bowl so you can see how I'm doing here. All right, we're going to start with rice vinegar, just regular unseasoned rice vinegar. And we got 3 tablespoons of that. And then my trusty Evu, extra virgin olive oil, but you can use any type of oil that you want. I mean, a grapeseed oil is fine. Anything that's a liquid oil as opposed to a viscous one. Okay, we're going to add that. And then fish sauce. I'm sure many of you are familiar with fish sauce. Fish sauce. It's become a really popular item I mean, it's used mostly in Thai and Asian cooking, but it's really become a very popular item around the world because of the predominance of the spread, I guess you could say, of tasty Asian dishes. and it has what we call umami in it. So that adds to the sort of the deliciousness of the whole thing. That's the only way I can describe what umami is. So we're going to put a little of that in there. And then honey, just regular honey is fine. And what I like to do is warm it up so it gets a more liquid consistency and it mixes more easily with the other ingredients. We're just going to mix that in a little bit. There it goes. Perfect. And then our 2 teaspoons of tamarind concentrate. And this is what this looks like. See, it's a really dark, thick kind of paste. Not really a paste, more of a almost like honey. There we go. Put a couple of those in. And my whisk. Did I not get it out? I'm going to whisk that. If you're making a lot of this, I would recommend that you double the sauce of the vinaigrette, and you can just pour on as much as you think you're going to need for that particular amount, because you'll probably want to make this again at some point. But this will make enough vinaigrette to season the amount of slaw that I have in here, which is what looks like about 6 cups, maybe a little over that. Maybe, yeah, probably about 6 cups. Okay, so that's done. Now, I'm going to add to this spring onions, scallions that have been sliced thin, and mint. I just picked this from the garden. I like to leave the leaves whole. This is a mixture of spearmint and peppermint. A little different in look. I like the strong, really intense flavor of the peppermint, so I throw some of that in. It's up to you to decide which one you prefer, but they're both very, very good in this. I'm just going to put in whole leaves, but you can chop yours if you prefer. And we're just going to put a bunch of it in here. The more the herbs you've got in this, it's like a lot of Asian cuisine, especially Thai cuisine. The more the herbs you have in it, the better it's going to taste. Okay, now we've got some basil, which is not from my garden. It's the type the one that I get from the supermarket. My basil's not far enough along for me to start harvesting it just yet. And I didn't grow any through the winter, so we're just going to use this. And I like to tear it, just tear it in pieces. You could also chop it, of course. Putting a bunch of that in there. And a little bit more. And there's some smaller leaves that can stay whole. There we go. And mix all that together. And we're going to pour our dressing right over it. There we go. The color is really getting in there with the cabbages. You can see that there's plenty of dressing for all of this. And then, like everything else, like so many of this Asian salads, you need a crunch. I mean, obviously there's crunch in the actual cabbage, but a real crunch, a real nutty crunch. And for that we're going to add 2 items. The first is some chopped up peanuts, and the second is French fried onions. You can get these in the Asian markets. Excuse me. I'm forgetting the word for it. But anyway, there's different kinds of onions that you can get in the Asian markets. But these are just regular regular onions. Before I do that, though, I want to salt and pepper it. That's important because these are very heavily salted, and so you want to go easy. You want to salt and pepper it, but you want to do it lightly because you need to get the cabbage itself seasoned, and these will provide salt, but they won't season the cabbage. So you do want to get that in. We're going to do some pepper, and we're going to toss again. And then the final presentation is going to be with our French fried onions. Shallots, that's the word I was looking for. Finally comes to me. Okay, and the shallots are red, so they would be actually quite pretty in this. But depending on whether or not you're using, a red cabbage, you could go in any direction you want when it comes to that. You don't have to make a special trip, in other words. So here we are. These are all ingredients you can find in your supermarket, including the tamarind. I found both the concentrated and the fresh tamarind in the better supermarkets like Whole Foods, Wegmans, Harris Teeter, and even in others they'll have it seasonally. So not hard to find, and really wonderful, great taste. That wonderful sourness. So that's it. Thanks for joining me. We are going to.
Actually, I have a quick question for you, Adrienne, before we move on. And this is a great use for tamarind. What are some other great uses? Because that's a very big jar of paste and you used a very small amount. So what are some other ways you could maybe use tamarind in your cooking?
Right, that's a really great question. Tamarind is actually amazingly wonderful in barbecue sauces. So if you make your own barbecue sauce, definitely have some tamarind around. It's also great in drinks. Danielle's going to talk a little bit about the health benefits of tamarind, which are actually fairly extensive. I was surprised to learn as I was Googling it. But it's very refreshing. And you mix it with a little honey, put it in some water, drop some ice in there, just, stir it all up, drop some ice in there, and it's just lovely as a summer drink. And increasingly you're going to find recipes for tamarind, for using tamarind in different things. The vinaigrettes, the sauces are the primary place for them. It's also used in desserts. I don't actually have any good ideas right now for you for desserts because I have not tried it in that. But I know that in some cultures, like in India, it's used as a sweet rather than as a sour ingredient in those kinds of dishes. So I think that once you start using it, you'll probably find that you're going to want to put it in other things. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, definitely. And one more, can you use Thai basil or Italian basil in the slaw? Does it matter?
Yes, you could. This is the one that I've got is a common basil. The Thai basil would be just amazing. Any basil is fine. And if you don't have basil, you can just put in just put in more mint. And I think the mint basil combination is really ideal, but you can throw in something else, chives, parsley. So yeah.
And then a lot of recipes, as someone in the chat has said, call for lemon juice instead of tamarind. Can you generally switch from tamarind to lemon juice?
Yes, so that's the reason for that is because the tamarind has that sour flavor. You probably could. I have not tried this particular recipe with lemon juice instead of tamarind. I think it would be delicious. But yeah, since we're talking about lemons today, let's give them a break too.
So with that, we'll jump over to Danielle, and who's going to talk with us a little bit about the nutritional value of tamarind, and then also share a delicious pasta recipe using lemon. So take it away, Danielle.
Good morning, everyone, and happy Arbor Day. It's a good thing I was on mute because I was going to be jumping in on my big sister Adrienne on a few of these things because I had so many ideas and answers to her questions. But let's just stick with the tamarind for a second here. In terms of the interchangeability, I think lemon could certainly work, but my go-to would be probably lime, especially with those Thai and Asian recipes. That is seems to be a more natural substitute. I love the use of all of her herbs. She's really great at using these herbs in the whole form, in the whole leaf form. And one of the herbs that I would probably have put in there if I didn't have basil was cilantro, and we didn't talk about that. I know a lot of people don't care for cilantro and can't tolerate the flavor of it, so then you would leave it out. But that would seem to me to be a really good option. But in our talk about the wonderful health benefits of tamarind, which has been around for eons, and it's been used medicinally since really ancient times, used primarily as a laxative, actually, because it's got a very, very high content of fiber. It also has very high content of B vitamins, notably B1 and B3, and potassium. So the combination of the potassium and the fiber really are a driver for a laxative, but not so much as a hardcore laxative, but also just generally used for digestive health. We know that there are studies that continue to be ongoing to looking at it as a mechanism also to help lower blood sugar levels. So antioxidants are also a big factor in tamarind, so antioxidants are usually what, they are that deep color that you find in your fruits and vegetables. And tamarind is very dark, but it is a very high source of antioxidants. So with all of this, it also works as a good detoxifier for the liver. And because of the antioxidants, the fiber, all of that, you take it another step and look at it in terms of good for cardiovascular health. So it's a really interesting food to work with. One of the other items in foods that we did not talk about or was not mentioned is that it's used commonly in chutneys, all kinds of chutneys and stews. So think about it in those terms, especially as it's a great all year food, but as we move into the summer and the hotter months, and you want that sour and that sweet kind of combo, which is why Adrienne's slaw was so fabulous, really combining that. But you can think about it in terms of using it in salad dressings to really just kind of pop that tang. So with that, I'm going to work with lemons today, which I think is another great all year round food, but certainly as we are moving well into spring here and people are feeling a little sluggish and looking for lighter and more detoxifying foods, why not the tamarind and lemon? I will say right off the bat, my pasta dish today, first of all, it's not super detoxifying and light because it is pasta, but it's delicious. And please do not substitute tamarind for this. It's just not going to work. But I'm playing off of lemons today, and I'm going to switch over my camera so you won't have to look at my face anymore, but you will look at my workspace. So let's switch over and get moving on this great pasta dish. And we have a lineup here of lemons. And lemons. This is sort of what I call it, the trifecta of pestos or pasta pesto, because we're going to be using lemons, and we are going to be using some lemon rind as well, and we're going to be using preserved lemons. Well, welcome back to the jar of preserved lemons. For those of you who were with us last fall when we worked on our pickle presentation, I showed you how to make preserved lemons. They're super easy to make, and we're going to link you to that video if you didn't see it and you want to learn how to make them. So just a quick word about preserved lemons. I also have actually here a jar of kumquats that I've had in my fridge for, oh gosh, I want to say probably close to 5 years. I haven't actually opened this jar, so it just goes to show you how long preserving citrus can last, really for eons. But the preserved lemons are also very common to find in grocery stores, certainly in Middle Eastern markets these days, and more and more commonly, actually, you can find them in the salad, well, the olive section, that olive bar, which I know we're not doing bars right now, but the fresh olive section in your grocery stores, now, you know, they're pre-packaging in the clamshells olives, and you can buy like 1 or 2 preserved lemons, so you don't have to buy an entire jar of them. And there are multiple uses for these, really, in both, you know, year-round cuisine. But let's get started. We're going to deal with this in just a minute, but I'm going to kind of work backwards on this recipe, and I want to start by doing the breadcrumb topping. So I've got about a tablespoon of butter here and the equal amount of olive oil, and I'm going to get that melted over medium-high heat. And we're going to toast our breadcrumbs, and I can probably multitask this. Let's just get that butter melted before we add the breadcrumbs into there. And we're going to toast the breadcrumbs and add some lemon zest and a little bit of cheese into that. And while that's going, we can also be working on the pesto part. And our pesto today is going to be, as I said, the preserved lemon and fresh lemon. And I'm going to put walnuts in. Pestos traditionally, I mean, pestos are just like a mash. It doesn't have to be a basil pesto, right? There are arugula pestos, and there are today preserved lemon and lemon pestos, both. So pestos it's a great way to get good nutrition into a meal, because you can really actually jam a lot of different good vegetables and herbs into a puree of pesto. Okay, our butter and olive oil are sizzling, so I'm going to go ahead and add our breadcrumbs. And today I'm using panko breadcrumbs. Panko is a Japanese style breadcrumbs. You could use regular Italian breadcrumbs. That would be just fine. So when you're doing this, you want to keep an eye, pretty close eye on the breadcrumbs, because once the pan gets good and warm, the breadcrumbs will start to brown quite quickly. So I like to just keep moving the breadcrumbs around in the pan, so make sure I don't overlook them and they'll get away from me too quickly. Same concept as with when you're doing nuts, if you're dry toasting nuts. And today I did actually already dry toasted the walnuts, because there are a number of ingredients in the pesto, and we need to move through this so that you have time to ask all the questions you need, and we're not just sitting here, you know, watching the water boil, so to speak. I'm using a cassarecci pasta today, which you can use a penne. I don't think you could use a thick spaghetti, or linguine, but I prefer the short, more stubby kinds of pasta with this, so that the pesto can really cling to it. Any of these, you know, even a fusilli, but penne would work great. Your choice. Okay, this is browning on the exterior. Looking nice and golden. Smelling nice and nutty. And like I said, once the pan gets pretty warm, this comes along quite quickly. It's browning up nicely. I don't want to overdo it, so I have my bowl ready to transfer it out of the hot pan. All right, I'm not going to risk that any further, so I'm going to turn the heat off and move it into a bowl. That. And we're going to add our teaspoon of lemon zest and 1 tablespoon of Parmesan. Maybe I'll just do a little bit more. Why not? Okay. Got a bit of a stir, and then we're going to set it to the side, and this is going to be our topping. I'm going to also put just a sprinkling of sea salt. All right. So this looks good. We'll set that aside. And now for our pesto. So I'm going to start by taking one of these. I've already juiced the lemon, and we've already done the zest, so we can set those aside. Okay, let's see how these guys are doing. So I haven't used this one, but I think I used part of the one that's underneath. I like to hang on to the juice of the preserved lemon every now and again. It's nice to use just a tiny bit, because when we preserve these, we put a lot of salt in the juice, so it's highly salty, and it does make for a nice addition into salad dressings once in a while, but just like 1/4 teaspoon because of the intense flavor. So these have been here since last fall, sitting preserving in my fridge. And I'm going to, for today's purposes, now when I use preserved lemons, normally I get rid of the pulp, because that's kind of, all the flavors kind of not completely dissipated, but it tends to be, as it preserves and as it ages, the pulp becomes a little slippery and slimy and not very necessary, not very even pleasant to bite into. You would just use the rind, which has really relaxed and taken on this very, not quite earthy, but just a very, a depth of flavor, where the rind is no longer bitter, but it's very perfumed and very intense. But for today, we're going to use about a tablespoon. This is a little more than we need. And I'm going to keep the pulp in there because we're going to put it all through the food processor. I will be getting rid of the seeds. We don't want that in there. But I'm going to just use about 2/3 of this. I'll cut that in half and put that in there. Make sure I get all the seeds out. Yep. This piece can go back in, and this can go back in. And we can return that to the fridge later. Okay, so we've got our preserved lemon. We're going to put in a clove of garlic. We're going to add our toasted walnuts, which are quite brown. I actually toasted them in the toaster oven, not in the skillet today. There's a 1/2 cup of walnuts. If you're not a fan of walnuts, you can use almonds. You could use pistachios, although they tend to be more pricey. You could even use pumpkin seeds, but my first go-to, if you don't want walnuts, my first go-to would be almonds. And now we have fresh basil. This is Italian basil, just the common basil, as Adrienne referred to it. And we have that's a loose cup, so packed 1/2 cup. All right, so let's start by getting that all mashed up. And it's got a nice, sort of like cornmeal minced to mash to it. That looks good. And we're going to sprinkle in some more cheese. This time it's a 1/4 cup of cheese. I'm not going to add salt in this because we put our preserved lemon in here, and the preserved lemon is got a lot of salt in it from the preserving process. So I'm not going to, you know, as we always say, Adrienne and I, you can always add, but you can't take away. So we don't want to over salt anything. And I've got a little salt going on in the breadcrumb topping. So we'll pulse this. And then with the motor running, I'm going to go ahead and drizzle in some olive oil. This is it's actually not an Italian olive oil. It's a Greek olive oil, which happens to be my preference. Okay. You don't want to over mix on this, okay? You want it thick. This looks good. Thick and with some texture. You know, it's okay to have that nutty, that just kind of nutty mouth feel to this when you bite into it. Okay. All right, and I think we're all there. I have already cooked the pasta, and when I poured it off, I retained some pasta water, which is a great tool to have. You can hang on to pasta water for other things other than making our pesto today. You can use it, you know, as it's got a little bit of flavor, and because the starch is in there, it's going to have a little bit of a thickening agent, so it can be used in other things as well. So this is about 12 ounces of pasta. Go ahead and transfer that into my bowl. And because it's been sitting for a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and just give it a little zhuzh. Loosen it up a bit with the water. And our pesto is quite thick, so you're going to need to add a little bit of the pesto water anyway. I mean the pasta water, not the pesto water, the pasta water. Set that aside. So lemons, of course, you know, full of vitamin C, and the oils in the rind are also so wonderful for you. A great antimicrobial benefits as well. So, you know, it likes to get rid of microbes, microbial and fungi that might be living in your gut. It's great for rebalancing your microbiome. There's really no downside to having a lot of citrus in your diet. All right. You could also add some parsley into this, either in addition to the basil, or if you didn't have basil, you know, you could substitute parsley, but you know, this is like the basil and lemon combination is so fantastic. Lunch is served. All right, so get that well mixed. This is a great meal, you know, a midweek meal, because it comes together really quickly. If you wanted to add more protein in there, you could certainly do that. You could put in some, I would go for maybe some leftover chopped chicken, or some sausage, some small sausage rounds or cubes. You could even toss in, if you didn't want to go meat, you could go toss in some lightly sauteed asparagus. That what would be more seasonal, spring seasonal than that? Okay. And I'm going to do this in the serving bowl, but when you're at home, what you probably want to do is just dish up your individual bowls and then sprinkle each person's individual bowl with a little breadcrumbs. So I hope that is an inspiration for a busy weeknight menu for you all. I'm going to switch back and switch my camera back and take any questions that you guys might have.
Hi, Danielle. Thank you for that amazing presentation. I know I'm ready for some pasta right now. And let's see, I do have a question for you. Let me just pull it up here. If we don't have any preserved lemons or we're a little intimidated by making them, what could be a good substitute to use?
So I would just put in some lemon juice with some lemon zest, and I would probably hold back on the lemon zest in the breadcrumb topping. So kind of move things around that way. I mean, really, if you, as I mentioned, the grocery stores have at the Olive Bar, if you have access to that and wanted just to get one preserved lemon, that would be a way to go, because they keep forever in the fridge, and then you can end up chopping them up and using them for other things and salads and so forth. But yeah, I just back out the, so we're talking about a tablespoon, about a half a wedge of preserved lemons. So you would want to use, probably the zest of an entire lemon and a good 3 tablespoons of lemon juice.
That sounds delicious. And we've got another question here is, could you make a vegan version of this recipe?
Yes, you absolutely could. Just get rid of the cheese entirely. I do pestos all the time that don't have cheese in them, that are just nut based. Mm-hmm.
And how did you toast your walnuts in the toaster oven for your dish today?
Yes, I'll show you. I covered my little toaster oven pan with oil and just put the walnuts right on there and put them in the toaster oven at 350 degrees for 5 minutes, and set a timer, because they will get brown. Nothing will happen. Then all of a sudden, the last 45 seconds, boom, they turn very brown. And that's the case with any nuts, or all nuts, really. So do keep an eye on them. If you don't want to do the toaster oven method, then you would do similar to what I did with the breadcrumbs, but on a dry pan. I don't ever use any oil when I'm toasting. This is why they call it dry toasting. Yeah.
I see. And the pasta dish, do you normally serve that hot, room temperature, or cold when you're serving it?
Warm or room temperature is fine. It doesn't need to be hot, no. But not cold either, because once it gets too cold, the oils start to settle, the oils in the nuts, it all settles, the breadcrumbs become a little soggy, that sort of thing. So definitely a warm or room temperature. That's why as we move into hotter weather, it's nice to have this. It's just, a very satisfying meal without being hot or overly heavy.
Do you have a recipe for tamarind juice?
Recipe for tamarind juice? No, I think Adrienne has possibly used it in sort of these spritzers. Maybe she can address that, but I have not actually made it. I think it'd be good as an iced tea as well.
Yeah, I think you might be able to find it Middle Eastern in stores that carry Middle Eastern ingredients, probably most likely in a can, but making it with the concentrate, as I mentioned before, another use of the tamarind, making it with concentrate and, just adding honey to it. You could also add a little lemon to it and just kind of mix it up like that. And you could make a very nice juice out of that, adding water, of course. But no, the straight juice, I have not seen that. But it might be available through Asian, or not Asian so much, maybe Indian, Middle Eastern markets.
Actually, the question was more if you've had a recipe, if you made it into a juice.
Yeah, I mean, no, I have not made juice. I've only made it from this. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And Adrienne, do you have any recommendations for what you might serve the slaw with?
Oh yeah, we're gonna have it for dinner tonight. And my plan is to make scallops. along with it. But you can also slice nice, if you've got some leftover steak or beef, you can slice beef really, really thin, put that on top and drizzle a little bit more of the dressing over the beef. That would be really nice. If you're talking about a side, I mean, it'll go with like a roast chicken. It'll go with, you know, with a steak on the barbecue. It'll go with, on the grill, sorry. And it'll go with fish. Wonderful with any type of seafood.
Or pork tenderloin.
Yeah. That's a good one. Pork tenderloin. Yep, excellent.
And Adrienne, we've got another question. If folks can't find tamarind, is there any other substitute for that flavor or something else they could use?
The closest thing I've seen is pomegranate. It's not quite the same, but it has that kind of combination of sweet and sour. And you might be able to just, you know, substitute if you don't want to do the lemon, as we talked about earlier, but if you substitute the color and the kind of consistency that tamarind provides, go with a pomegranate paste or pomegranate concentrate. Yeah.
Can I just jump in on that? With the pomegranate, sure. You need to be aware of the difference between the pomegranate paste, the pomegranate syrup, the pomegranate molasses. There are very different sugar contents to those, and some come from Lebanon and Turkey, most commonly. Some are actually out of Iran. So the most sour is going to be the paste, and the sweetest, or the molasses, and the syrup is going to be sweeter. So pay attention to your labels. But I think that would be an interesting swap out. Pomegranate does have a more floral flavor to it, but you do indeed get that sour, sweet balance with it.
Well, thank you both. Those are all of our questions for today. Thank you to everyone who joined us for this program, and thank you again to Adrienne and Danielle.